Hello, I'm Alex, and talk a little bit about muscles today. As muscles contract, they generate electricity, which we measure at the surface of the skin. We can filter it, amplify it, convert it to digital, and transmit it to something like a computer or an iPhone. We use muscles all the time for everything, from obviously physical activities like running to not obviously physical activities like sitting in your chair and not falling out. But more critically, the reason I'm interested in muscles is because they're under voluntary control. So you can train a muscle to behave differently. Here we have muscles pre and post training for handwriting and keyboarding with mousing in a way that's done to minimize activation to reduce risk of developing a repetitive strain injury. And in the next slide, we have sitting, standing, walking, standing, and sitting, pre and post training with some average values shown. Don't get too hung up on the details. The point is that you can train muscles to behave differently. You can modify behavior if we know what they're doing and we can quantify that. So to talk technical for just 1 second, the signal is picked up at the surface of the skin via these conductive sensors. There's about 3 sensors for each muscle you want to measure. There's 2 actives and 1 ground. And they're transmitted via lead wires to a box that you wear on your waist. And that box transmits wirelessly to a receiver of some sort. There have been some changes and improvements over the years to make that slightly less cumbersome with the number of wires like you see here, but at the end of the day it's still kind of a mess when you want to see 16 channels and you have like, at least 33, 34 wires. So as you can see here, I mean, imagine trying to measure somebody's natural behavior when you hook them up like this. It's almost impossible. So one of the things that we're doing is to develop a better kind of sensor, and that's these things right here. That basically it's the whole sensor transmitter in one. There's no wires. So the idea is, here I am applying it. The heart is obviously a muscle, so you can use these for continuous heart rate monitoring or for measuring skeletal muscle output. And here we have so. Great, mute myself here. So the number that's increasing right here, this is the work done by the muscle, and that translates into a warm-up level here. And this is the heart rate right here, which is in a sort of more intuitive format of being a speedometer. I'm actually measuring myself right now. So the point of this here is actually to show you the warm-up gauge increasing. So as the amount of energy that comes out of the muscles goes up, you can actually quantify that into a discrete goal for when you are fully warmed up. In this experiment, what I was doing is I ran on a treadmill at 6.5 miles an hour, and I kept the speed constant but varied the stride rate with an audio track, going from 120 to 170 beats per minute. The idea was to see if there is a stride rate which minimizes the energy expenditure in order to delay the onset of fatigue during a run or a bike or something like that. And I added up the work done by my quads, my hamstrings, and my calves, and found that there was a sweet spot at 130 beats per minute. And there's also a secondary sweet spot, which is not quite as good, but if you want to go faster, say, like up or down a hill, and you need to use shorter steps, it's almost like a second gear for runners or something. And that was pretty exciting to see because this is more of an advanced application, and for more of a sophisticated runner or biker, but still it's something that I haven't seen too much that's been done with this before. The other thing that I did in my next experiment was to try and quantify muscle fatigue in dynamic circumstances. So this is a 30-minute run, and we know that fast twitch fibers have greater amplitude and operate at a different average frequency than slow twitch fibers. So there seems to be a shift that correlates with the so-called fast twitch, slow twitch switch when you go from anaerobic metabolism to aerobic metabolism. But in order to really confirm that, we would have to look at like the median frequency to see if there's a difference in which fibers predominate, if that's really due to some kind of random artifact or if it's because actually the fast twitch fibers are fatiguing. So the bottom 2 graphs here are actually the median frequency, which you see decreases around the same time as the amplitude decreases. So it's a pretty good indication that what we're measuring here is, in fact, fast twitch fatigue in dynamic circumstances. And one of the things we're trying to do also then is to quantify fatigue of slow twitch fibers as well. This is showing recovery level, and you can't really see it too well, but the starting amplitude here is about 1,000 microvolts. And this is after only 24 hours of recovery, which I'm not in good shape, so that's not enough. So this starting on day 2 starts at about 500, so it's about half as much. So you can actually see how recovered you are from your previous run. It's by looking at that initial level. Where are we? And day 3, which is coming up here in a second, my calves started to feel really sore, and that actually translated into data. So you can see that they started off at a much lower amplitude than the other muscles relative to what we were looking at. The previous graphs were just left and right quad, and this is quads, hams, and calves being looked at all together. So I got a knee injury a few years ago, and on my left side. And so what happens is sometimes I start to compensate on my right side when pain starts to come in here. The red graph is the right side. So even before I started to consciously notice that I was favoring one side or the other, it showed up in a graph as an injury. So overall, found the stride rate sweet spot, found that fatigue seems to be visible, looked at some recovery level information and managed to quantify that a little bit, and also saw the early onset of an injury, which showed up in the data as well. And we're really just starting to scratch the surface of some of the different applications of this. We're focusing on running and biking to begin with, but I'm thinking about other applications like muscle isolation in yoga, power and fatigue in weightlifting. We're thinking about injury tracking or recovery tracking, like when is it safe to get back into working out or exercising at full bore again after an injury. Control mechanisms for prosthetic devices, control mechanisms for robotic arms, things like that. Controllers for video games, and any number of applications like that. And after this is over, if you have any other ideas, I'd love to hear from you. Anything involving muscles or heart, and how we can take this data and make it meaningful. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's stay here. You gotta answer questions.
I can do that.
So did you feel those sweet spots? Did you have any intuition of where those sweet spots were when you were actually running?
No, I had absolutely none. So I only had about 15 seconds at each of these paces. It's possible that if I did one for 2 hours, that maybe over time I would have felt a difference. But the truth is I didn't feel a difference.
And also you say we. We're saying we. We meaning who's we?
The royal we. No, it's mostly myself, and we have 3 other people working with me. We have a small startup company that's developing this technology.
And that is the disc.
That is these little devices, exactly. So I'm actually wearing one right now. I'm going to flash the whole audience. Can you put your contact mic on? Sure. I'm actually streaming my information. Yeah, I can do that. I can get to the last slide. I have cards and stuff, so if you guys want to find me after the thing to talk.
Okay, we're going to take some questions. What I'd just like to ask you to do, since it's not that big a group, is speak up as loud as you can in the questions. And if you can't hear the question, just say you can't hear it, and then you can repeat it.
Sure, I can do that. Great. Back there?
What's the battery life like?
It's 100 hours of continuous use. So we estimate that the average runner runs 3 times a week for an hour. So this is supposed to last at least a year of use.
And it goes right away, or is it
there's actually, it works on a little CR2032 coin cell battery, which you can find just about anywhere in Radio Shack.
So how about for an application like massage? Would you be able to see if somebody works your muscles? Would you be able to tell something out of that?
So it measures the output of the muscles. So, I mean, probably not. What it tells you is like the electrical activity that's coming out. So, if you are tensing up during your massage when you should be relaxing, it can tell you that. But it won't tell you like how good it feels, or it won't tell you how much lactic acid is being released. It won't tell you the temperature of the muscles or anything like that.
But if it were tense, I mean,
yes.
if it released the electrical...
You could see the person relaxing during the massage. If they came in tense and they started to relax in the course of the massage, you could see that. Right. But at the same time, like, you have to place this on the muscle that you're interested in monitoring.
Yeah.
So that would be a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
How many sensors can you track at the same time?
So this particular one that we've developed is for a specific customer. They're working on the ANT protocol. So I think ANT has a limitation of something like 8 at a time, but we're also making a Bluetooth low energy version. And for Bluetooth receivers, the limitation is really the computer or the system that you're transmitting to. So if you're going to a PC, if it's running Linux, it's virtually unlimited numbers of sensors if you wanted to, say, do like a medical or a research application. But for most...
Let's just stop for 1 second, because I'm not sure, is everyone comfortable with ANT?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So let's just expose that. That's good for people.
So ANT is a fitness protocol that's been developed by Garmin as a sort of an open source platform that a lot of different companies are working with. So Garmin is on the ANT platform, obviously they created it, but a number of other companies are too. And the idea is that if you're a sensor company or a watch company, you don't have to also make all the other parts in the system. So you can just make a watch that's ANT compatible, and then some other people that make other sensors like foot pods or accelerometers, heart rate monitors, they'll all be compatible with your watch. So the idea is to create a little ecosystem of very low energy products that work together. And there's a lot of talk about whether or not ANT is actually going to win, because Bluetooth Low Energy is the big competing modality. But there are big players
just so
on
that
both
people
sides.
know.
Yeah.
I want to throw in a question here before we go to others, which
Sure.
is, did your feeling about your body or your muscles or your activity change in any way when you started to have access to data about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that's really interesting is that when a muscle is technically off, it's at 2 microvolts. But when you first put a sensor on and start to measure it, your feeling of being relaxed is absolutely usually not relaxed. And it's very interesting to see, because you can tell someone, relax, and they'll say, okay, I'm relaxed. And then you actually put it on and they're floating at 35, 40 microvolts. And then you bring them down for the first time. And there's really strange things that happen as the body readjusts to its normal levels. I've seen actually people start to cry involuntarily, or they get really, really sleepy involuntarily. All sorts of funny things start to happen because the body can kind of adjust to a normal that is very, very different from time to time, from person to person, etc. And you can take it completely for granted that what you're feeling is normal or relaxed, and it may not be at all.
Okay, I have to we're going to go to some questions, but you are really on to something here. At the point where you've got a sensor that when people interact with it, they cry involuntarily, you're engaging in something that's super fascinating. So anyway, let's continue.
Yeah.
I guess I have 2 questions. One related to the actual physical activity, and then which would be, did you explore at all any changes over perhaps a long period of time where you could take into account differences in, say, resting heart rate and difference of cardiac fitness?
So the short answer to that is no, because we're working with relatively small population sizes, and I would love to be able to organize more sophisticated studies in which we take into account the multitude of human variables like age, height, weight, gender, body mass index, cardiovascular health, blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, you would have to probably study about 300 people. And part of the difficulty there is that a longitudinal
But I'm not talking about
studies.
inter-individual variation, I'm talking about intra-individual variation. So how do you change relative to yourself after
over
you've
time.
got improved cardiac fitness?
So, that again.
How you respond might not even impact how I respond, right? It might be irrelevant. There's going to be some similarity.
Sure. You mean the perception of what happens when you become more fit and lower your resting heart rate or something like that?
I'm saying if you track a person over a long enough time, you don't necessarily need lots of people in order to start talking about how an improvement in your cardiac health might have an impact on your musculature.
That's a great idea. We haven't done long-term studies. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have time for a couple more, so I want to give a couple people a chance, yeah.
Okay, I just want to know if you're doing anything related to vigorosity at all, which isn't intentional physical activity, but just keeping track of muscle tone sort of as you go through a day.
No, that's another good idea. We really aren't looking at that at all. We've been focusing on trying to market it, unfortunately, and the markets really we're looking at right now are running and biking. But personally, I think that would be fascinating.
Okay, two more quick ones, just
sure,
because people, it's such
please.
a great,
Question in the back.
Yeah, what's the sampling frequency, and have you looked at more than one at temporal correlations between muscle activations for different tasks, and is that something that's possible?
Repeat the latter part of that.
Looking at temporal correlations between the timing of activation and different muscles on different, if you have 2 units on them.
Okay. So sampling frequency, it really depends. A lot of the data that you see was from traditional medical systems that are sampling at about 1,000 samples a second. These have lower sample resolutions because for measuring heart rate, if all you're doing is R to R frequency or something like that, it's not that necessary. So in terms of, I'm sorry, one more time, temporal correlations. You're saying if you put it on.
In order to execute a movement effectively, the muscles need to be contracting in a very precise,
coordinated manner. Sure.
Is that something that you've looked at with your system? It'd be fascinating to see that, for instance, at your different gates are some of the,
Oh, I see.
sort of how.
Oh, you were the gate guy? No?
I'm not,
Maybe you're in the
I
vicinity of the
walk
gate
all
guy.
the time.
Someone mentioned that. No, that would be very interesting. Actually, we haven't really been looking at that in too much detail. I guess the only exception to that would be when we were analyzing running, and we have it on the quads, hamstrings, and calves at the same time, and you can see left side, right side, and you can see some of the timing variance to like calves versus quads and how that relates. But that's, in a way, it was a little bit peripheral to what we were looking at. It would be interesting though.
That is a great talk. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.